Hey, what's up, everybody? Chad Calek here, and welcome back to the In a Crowded Room podcast for episode number 67, where by request, I'm actually going to share with you the very first details of my family's haunting. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because we are actually offering a separate podcast series called American Ghost Hunter, The Devil in the Details, in which I will be releasing 10 2-hour long podcasts that takes you through 1986 to 1994 of the detailed account of what I went through with my family's haunting. Now, a lot of you know bits and pieces of the story from the American Ghost Hunter documentary, and I've had a lot of requests to tell part of the story so people can kind of get acquainted with the story a little bit, or at least how it began, so you know what it is that you would in fact be purchasing. As many of you also know, this is in an effort to hire and bring on a junior editor so that we can maintain a 6 episode per week release schedule. And I want to say thank you because a lot of you have purchased this series, and that means a lot to me. It does, big time, guys. So thank you so much. And I guess I just wanted to release an abbreviated version because this won't be 2 hours long, but it'll be long. But to go way, way, way back to the very beginning, how this all kind of started, because it is a crazy story. You know, it's funny how you don't know how crazy it is when you're living it in the moment, but in retrospect, wow. But having said that, this will not affect the 10 episodes that are coming out. There will be a full 2 hours per episode for 10 episodes. And the first one will be emailed to those who purchase American Ghost Hunter, The Devil in the Details. You will all receive episode number 1 on July 4th. And then a new episode every 7 days after will be emailed to you with your private link and password. Having said that, I want to get into this so you guys can see if it's something you want to order, and which you can do so. You can order the American Ghost Hunter, The Devil in the Details series by clicking the link in the description box below. I guess the best place to start would be the very, very, very beginning, which, as many of you know, I often reference Texas as my home. But the truth be told, I was actually born in Eglin Air Force Base. I am a military brat. My dad was an Air Force engineer that flew all over the world to fix planes and helicopters and to work on jets. And he was just very good at what he did. And I guess what he still could do today if he wasn't injured, which we'll get into that as well. But I guess I'm bringing this up because as a child, we were not religious in any capacity that I could remember. Most of my childhood, my father was not around, not until about 7 or 8 years old. That's about the earliest memories I have of him. And that's because he was stationed all over the world, in Guam, in Sweden, in Germany, all over the place. And I do remember talking to him about some of the earliest UFO sightings that were around the Gulf Breeze of Florida. And this is when, he would be back on leave and stuff like that. And I mentioned this in the film, but this is very true, where he would often say to me, well, all those, UFO sightings are planes that we're flying around. And the reason I told that story in the American Ghost Hunter documentary is that kind of summed up my family's view about religion, gods, monsters, like all that stuff. It wasn't important to us. We didn't talk about it. We didn't believe in it. We were very much a factual, by the numbers family. And when my parents did go to church, it was usually because we moved around a lot. Once my dad started getting stationed in America a lot, we would move a lot within Texas. We lived briefly in Austin, briefly in San Antonio, but most of the time in Alvin, Texas. So when they would move around, they would go to church a lot, but it was more of a social event. It was just to get to know people in the community. And once they met people, we didn't really go back to church after that. And when I think back to those days, to be honest, life was really good. Like, my parents were very happy. I had great friends. I love Texas. I love the weather. I know it's hot as can be, but I was a baseball player, and I loved playing baseball in the summer sun. And I loved a cold lemonade. I loved riding bikes and fishing and things like that. Most of my memories in Texas were great. I had a lot of great friends. My baseball coach when I was in Pee Wee's was actually Nolan Ryan, which is pretty funny. I went to school with his kids. Life was pretty good. And there was one day that changed everything. And when you talk about having bad days, I don't know that they get worse than the one that I'm about to share with you. But it started out as a normal day, like anything else. I woke up. It was hot as hell. Took the bus to school. Had early morning recess. And I remember that there was a girl that I liked. And at that young of an age, you don't really know what like means. I don't know what I wanted to do with her other than just spend time with her. And I remember I wanted to impress her. And she's a beautiful little Mexican girl, and she was watching all the boys play basketball. Now, I was not a great basketball player by any stretch of the imagination. Baseball was really my thing. Football too, but mostly baseball. But I wanted to play basketball. I wanted to impress this girl. And so I just called game, and I got in the next time. And the first time down the court, I remember my friend Billy took a shot, bricked it off the rim. I jumped up to get the rebound, and I heard what sounded like chalk breaking. Like if you took a piece of chalk, like chalk like you write on the chalkboard. If you broke the chalk, like that's what I heard. I remember falling down. I'm like, that's a weird sound. And I was kind of looking around to see who broke a big piece of chalk. And I got up and fell down. I'm like, that's weird. Stood back up again, took one step and fell down again. And I was like, what is going on? And I looked down and I could not believe what I saw. My right foot was backwards. And it dawned on me that I did not hear chalk break. I heard the ball of my ankle break, just crush. And my foot was now backwards. I let out the biggest screaming, yelping cry you could ever imagine. I was terrified. All of a sudden, the pain hit. Didn't happen right away. When the break happened, I did not feel it. But once I saw it, and once my mind knew what it was, yeah, it was extremely painful. All the kids were freaking out on the court. They didn't know what to do. So they were running to get our PE teacher, who's actually around the corner from where I was at. So it took probably, I don't know, in my mind it took, 10 minutes. It probably took 30 seconds for the PE teacher to come over. It was Miss Evans. And she saw my ankle and kneeled down and held my hand and just said, really calmly, I remember this because I appreciated it. It was really the right way to handle it. Really calmly, she just said, Chad, I need you to sit here and do your best not to look at your ankle. She said, you're injured, but you're going to be okay. I need to go inside and get the nurse. I need to call your parents. I need to call the EMTs. But I want you to know you're going to be okay. And I was like, I'm going to be okay. My foot's on backwards. But her calmness, I remember, was very appreciated. It made me feel like there was a chance that I was just freaking out, that it wasn't going to be that bad. Even though I'm looking at, like I said, my foot, is on backwards. Literally, my toes are pointing the opposite direction. That's how bad this break was. So the EMTs come and they put me on a stretcher and they take me into the EMTs and they tell me that my mother has been contacted and she's just going to meet me at the hospital. Which at this point, I'm kind of okay with things mentally, in the sense that I've accepted that I've broken my ankle and I'm not dead. I'm not bleeding anywhere. I can see the top of my sock is super swollen, so I know it's pretty bad, but I'm handling it. So I get to the hospital, and right away they take me in. The doctor, looks at it, and I can hear them, talking back and forth about what's going on. And I remember they roll me to a room, and it's quiet there, and I'm still waiting for my mom. I mean, I'm very, very much, and especially then, was a mama's boy. And I knew my dad wasn't going to be coming, just because that's not the way my family worked. My dad would have kept working, and my mom would have handled it. That's just how it went. And that was normal, and I was fine with that. So I'm really waiting for my mom to get there, because that's going to make me feel better than anything else, to be honest. So the time goes by, and she's not showing up, and I can't really figure out why. So eventually a doctor comes in and says, "Chad, your mom is on her way here." And, he just basically said, "We have a different surgeon that has to do this surgery. That it's complicated, but they have the right guy, and he's had training or worked at the Mayo Clinic before, but he was going to be the one to handle it. And that, to sit tight, that I would soon be going to surgery, basically." And now I'm getting pretty nervous. Mom's not there yet. They have to bring in a special doctor, which is freaking me out. And, I'm alone with my thoughts. And again, I'm only, 8 or 9 years old, this is young. And about that time, the phone rings, and I'm thinking, yes, my mom's here. And I pick up the phone, and it's my dad's foreman from work, from his work. And I'm like, "Hello?" And he's like, "Yeah, can I speak to Debbie?" And I said, "This is Chad. She's not here right now." And he goes, "Oh, she must be on her way to the hospital." And I said, "Yeah, they told me that she's going to be here soon." And he says, "No, she's going to Houston because your father was burned." And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean my father was burned?" And he goes, "Well, you should talk to your mom, but just know your father was burned and he's probably going to die." I didn't know how to even process that. My father is burned and he's going to die. What are you talking about? That's what this fucking guy said to me. I just started crying. I just said, "It's not true." And he said, "Well, please have your mom call me if she shows up there." And he hangs up. And in retrospect, looking at it, I'm just like, what a cocksucker. Why would you call a child and tell a child that? Even if it were true, which at the time I didn't know if it was or it wasn't. So I'm just waiting for my mother to show up. Now I'm freaking out because I just heard that my dad's going to die. And he is going to a hospital in Houston. Eventually, a series of nurses come in. And they explain to me that my dad was in fact burned in an accident at work. And that he had been life flighted to Houston. And then he was going to go to Galveston, a burn unit. And I asked them if they had talked to my mother. And they said yes, that she would be there the following morning. But that she had given permission for me to have my surgery that evening. And I'm going, oh my God, I gotta go to surgery alone? Yeah, I was terrified. But that's what happened. So I had my surgery. I remember getting out of surgery, being incredibly groggy. When I woke up in the morning, I thought for sure it was a dream. That my dad wasn't hurt. He wasn't injured. I just dreamt this. And it must have happened because I was scared. Because I got hurt. Maybe I had a dream he got hurt. And then my mom showed up. She said, yeah, your dad's been burned really bad. And we don't know if he's going to live. Well, I was freaked out because obviously I want to go see him. I want to go see him as quickly as I can. And I'm not getting out of the hospital anytime soon, that day. I literally just had surgery, and they had pins in my ankles, and they had a series of castings that they had to try out before I could leave. And, you got to do all the things you do when you have a broken ankle. I had to get my crutches, I got to finish up. So it was the following day. So we're going on day 3 now since my dad has been burned. And I remember that when we were driving to Houston, about halfway there, my mom decided to tell me that we were driving to say goodbye to my dad. Now, my dad's 5'9", probably about 160 pounds at that time. Not a big man by any stretch of the imagination. And so that's what I expected to see. A 5'9" guy that was about 160 pounds. And it was a very quiet drive all the way to the hospital. My brother didn't say much. I didn't say much. I was terrified. My mom just cried, not bawling out loud, but just wiping tears the whole way there. And we got there, and we met with a doctor who explained that we could not be with my dad for long, that we literally had to get in, say a few words, and get out, that he was not in any kind of place where he can handle stress, and we just had to go see him. And he explained to us what my dad was up against and why they were worried that he would die. He was not in a coma yet. There was talk of inducing one. That never happened. But there was also fear of him falling into a coma as well. Either way, 3/4 of his body was missing 3 layers of skin. So he was one gigantic open wound. And as they explained, that if he made it through the initial shock that week of what happened, that more than likely he was going to die of an infection. The chances of him healing everywhere without suffering a severe infection were next to none. And at that point, I had never prayed before. I had never saw the point in doing so. I didn't believe in a God. It just wasn't a part of our world. Nothing spiritual was. So they took us to see my dad, and the thing that I remember the most is he was huge. He was huge. He was almost 200 pounds, and that's because of the swelling, but also because they had to pump him full of fluids because his body was like a sieve. He had no skin to hold in fluid, to hold fluids in. So it was just like one big sieve. Water would come in and would just come out of his body. And I barely recognized him. His hair was all burnt off. The hair on his face was burnt off. He had bandages everywhere that were just covered in blood. It was fucking bad, man. Jesus Christ, it was bad. And I remember leaving, and I've never said this before except to my dad once. The first time I prayed that God would just take him, that he would die. Not because I didn't love him, because I didn't want him around. I would have given anything for him to be okay. I just didn't see a way back. I didn't see a way back. I just didn't know how he was going to make it through this. And I could see that he was so drugged up. I mean, his eyes, when he looked at me, he rolled his head to the side and just said, "Hey, boy, I'm okay." And I'm thinking, man, you are fucking far from okay. And I'm on crutches, and he said something about cool crutches or nice crutches or something like that. And I could see he was just trying really hard to pretend he was okay. And I loved him for that, but I remember just wanting to be out of there. I just felt like we gave him something to struggle with. It was hard for him to talk to us and to move his head and everything. And I just told him I loved him and that, I was going to let him rest. And if I wasn't around a lot to see him, it's just because I want him to rest and, to get better. So we left, and about a week later, same thing. I hear that they think there's an infection and we need to come back and say goodbye to him again. He's not going to make it through the night. I went in again. He's barely recognizable. He's extremely sick. He's extremely high. Doesn't really seem to have much of an idea of, where he's at, what's going on, or even who I am. He was just on so much morphine. I mean, they had him on crazy amounts of opiates. And they had to, I mean, just a horrible injury. So after I left, I told my mom, I don't want to go back. I don't want to see him anymore like that, because I didn't believe in my heart he would want that. I really didn't. So we were driving home, and your mom said, "Well, let's all pray. Let's all pray for him." And we got in a big argument. Well, I mean, I say a big argument. I guess it probably lasted all 30 seconds. But basically, I was just like, okay, we can pray. That's fine. But we're not having any discussions as to what we're going to do if he dies. Like, no one's talking about what are we going to do. My dad was the breadwinner. He was the only one who worked the job. He made all the money to come in. He was building us a house at that time, and we were all living in the garage. So we built the garage first. We moved in there on this little, 1 acre piece of land he bought. And I was just seeing, if Dad's not here, like, there are real issues we're going to have, beyond the fact that I don't have a father anymore. I'm thinking, what are we going to do? I mean, obviously my mom would have had to work, but, she's a high school dropout, and I just didn't know what position she can hold or what she can do to even, and this isn't about wanting things. This is thinking about, how do I keep a roof, above us, and that's what I was thinking as a child. I was thinking, I need to figure out at 8, 9 years old how I support this family. Because I was certain he was not going to live. No fucking way. So every time my mom would leave to go see him, I would expect her to come home, walk through the door, and say he's gone. And this was a daily routine. I remember her car coming up the driveway, and every day I just hold my breath like, oh God, today's the day. Here it comes. Here it comes. Your dad's gone. But that never happened. And a couple of weeks went by, and suddenly my mom started telling me that he was getting better, that she was healing him. I'm like, she's healing him? What the fuck are you talking about? And a few more weeks went by. He had been there about a month, and I hear we can come see him. And I remember we went up there into the burn unit, and her and Brian went in, and I went to the bathroom first. And when I came out, they had just went to the doors, so I was trailing behind a little bit. And we walked over, and he looked a little bit more like him, but he was still in bad shape. And she would just get behind him and she would say, "Lean your head back, Rock." And Rock was her nickname for him. She'd call him Rock. And he would lean his head back and she would put her hand on his forehead. He would close his eyes. The forehead was one of the only places on his body that he wasn't burned. She could actually touch him. Now, years later, he would tell me that he could feel her healing energy. And he said that he asked God and Jesus Christ to heal him. I can't even begin to express how bizarre this was for me to hear that coming from him. Again, this was not a spiritual man in any capacity, not that I ever saw. And I thought to myself, well, if he believes that and something's working, I'm not going to fight him on it. I didn't know how he was healing and how he was having this miraculous recovery, but 6 weeks after he was burned, 3rd and 4th degree, over 77% of his body, 6 weeks later, he got to come home. I heard from the doctor's mouth that his recovery was a medical miracle. I heard him call it that, a medical miracle. I didn't know what was going on, but that was the first time in my life ever where I stopped and considered, maybe there is something to all this. And I felt this immense amount of guilt. And I felt that because I had prayed for God to take him. Not to heal him, not to fix him, but to take him. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know. I was happy. I was happy he was getting better. I was happy he was home. But the process of healing to the point where he could walk around and actually do things took over a year. And we all kind of pitched in to take care of him. But once he did heal, it was just relearning life again. One of the biggest obstacles was that he could not sweat, and we lived in an incredibly hot climate. And what I mean by that is scar tissue doesn't allow you to sweat. So in the places that he wasn't burned, he would sweat profusely, but obviously nowhere on the scar tissue. It was like he was wearing a big coat all the time. So we knew we couldn't live in Texas. And that's how we actually wound up moving back to the Midwest, because my dad was from Omaha, Nebraska, and my mom was from Calek, Iowa, which is a twin city. So they knew they had family back there. So I hear one day out of the blue that we're moving to Omaha, Nebraska. And I loved Texas. I loved my friends there. I loved my school, my teachers. Yeah, it sucked to have a broken ankle, but, I was going to be fine. That was healing quickly. It was healing well. I was out of my cast. I could walk around. It was getting stronger. I did not want to move. God, I did not want to move. And we moved in with my aunt. I had an aunt that was slow. And I don't want to use the R word because that's just an ugly word, but she was just mentally slow. But smart enough to take care of herself. And we lived there with her in Carter Lake, Iowa, which was like just this 2-bedroom little tiny house. We lived there for almost 2 years. And throughout that time period, my father had won a lawsuit because the uniform that he was wearing at this concrete company, that's where he worked at. The uniform that he was wearing was supposed to be 100% cotton. We found out after the injury that it was 70% polyester. Now, the reason why that is really bad is that polyester does not burn. Polyester melts. So my dad's uniform melted into his skin, which is why his burns were so deep. Now, how did he get burned? How did he get burned? This is a very crazy story, and there are many different accounts as to what happened. My dad, by his own admittance, is only clear on certain parts of it because this accident affected his memory. But what he remembers is he was inside this big machine shed of this concrete company, which he was the chief engineer. And there was a gentleman who had drained the oil and the gasoline out of one of the mixers, and it was on rollers, which is like this wooden square with 4 wheels on it. And he put this metal drum, like a 5-gallon drum cut in half. It sits on these rollers. And my father was giving a gentleman welding lessons, was showing him how to weld. Now, the person who drained this oil and gasoline started dragging it full on rollers and was not paying attention to where he was going. And when my dad was welding, he was too close to what he was welding, so he couldn't hear the rollers. This guy went behind my father, in which the sparks flew out and hit this oil drum and ignited it. Now, that did not burn my father or burn anybody, but my dad could see the danger of it. So he went and he grabbed this tarp, and he threw this tarp over the top of this oil drum and started dragging it on rollers to try to get it towards the door and get it away from all the other vehicles that had gasoline in them and oil in them, and get it away from people. Now, right as he got to the main shed, the big shed door, the wheels on the wooden roller hit the lip of where they pour concrete, and the wheels got jammed. And what it did is it sloshed all of the oil and the gasoline onto his body. And the second the tarp came up and some oxygen could get in there, the oxygen ignited all of it. And it ignited my father. His hair and skin that was exposed started burning, and his clothes started melting. He felt the flames around him. He thought that he had hit the ground and was rolling, where by eyewitness accounts he was not rolling, he was running. And my dad's best friend at that time, a guy named Alan Castillo, saw this and knew my father needed to be put out because he was burning and running around on fire. And Alan ran across the concrete company and tackled my dad and put him out with his own body, in which Alan suffered third-degree burns on his hands too. So this was a brutal accident. A brutal accident. One that he's magically recovering from somehow. So here we are in small town Carter Lake, Iowa, living with my aunt, just jammed in like sardines, and we get the word that this settlement is coming because, again, his outfit was 100%, or was supposed to be 100% cotton. It was 70% polyester. So the company that made the uniforms, that's who was sued. And also his employer was sued because it was complete neglect. So they knew they had a nice check coming. Now, when you say nice check, that's relative because there's no amount of money on planet Earth that my father wouldn't have given back to get his health back. but they knew they were going to be able to buy a house at least. And there was enough money there initially where they could live the rest of their life and not have to worry about anything if they just took care of the money. Just didn't do anything stupid with it. And they'd be fine the rest of their life. And that made me feel good because I wanted my father to at least have the ability to choose, where if you want to go try and work and start a career again at something else, you can. But because you're so injured, you don't have to. Like, that was where I kind of hoped they would be. And so I start hearing that we're not going to be living with my Aunt Jeannie, that my parents are going to start looking at houses. And the same day I heard this, the next day, I hear that we're going to look at a house in a town called Persia, Iowa, that has 300 people in it. And I'm told that I'm going because my mother wants my feedback and she wants my brother's feedback. She, by the way, is glowing about this house. She's never seen it, but before we leave, we're already hearing about how it's the country home she always wanted. It's the most beautiful thing she's ever seen. She can't believe the price of it. She's in love with it. It's a Norman Rockwell painting. It's, the most perfect thing. And I remember thinking at that time, man, she seems way into this place and we've never seen it. Aren't they going to take their time and look at some different places? I mean, they got money. For the first time in our entire life, we had money. And believe me, we grew up poor as shit. I mean, it was nothing for me, for Christmas time to just get my brother's old shit regifted, Here's some new clothes for you, Chad. You open it up, it's fucking Brian's clothes from last year. And you know what? When I was really young, that was normal. I didn't know any different, man, I remember one year I got Brian's old boombox as my new boombox for Christmas and was happy as shit with that. Totally cool. And now my parents had money. I mean, I don't, it's personal, so I don't want to say how much, but enough money where they should have been able to live the rest of their life, no problem. And, but we're going to see this house in Persia. And the whole way there, I remember she's talking about how she's going to decorate it and the things we can do there. And I could see it. My dad is nervous as shit. He is uncomfortable with this conversation. He doesn't like it. He doesn't like the direction that it's going. He doesn't like that she's that positive. He keeps saying, well, we'll see, Deb. We'll see. We'll see. And my mom's name is Deb. My dad's name is Rod. And he kept saying that, we'll see, Deb, we'll see. And what we'll see, Deb, means is he's uncomfortable. And that's what he keeps saying, we'll see, we'll see. So we're driving from Carter Lake out to Persia, Iowa. It's about an hour's drive, and we finally pull into Persia. And I had a weird feeling right away. I didn't like the town. It looked spooky, it looked small. Everything looked old and dead. The town just seemed to be falling apart. I didn't like the house. Didn't say it, though, because Mom was so positive about it. I didn't really want to say anything right away, but I did not like the exterior, other than it was big. I mean, it was a big, big old country house. So we pull up to the house, and the owner of the house is standing in the front yard waiting for us. I remember thinking this was kind of weird because they all lived in the house. The family that was selling the home lived there. And they didn't know exactly when we were going to show up. This is pre-cell phone era. And I remember thinking, so he just camped out in the front yard waiting for us? Why wouldn't he be sitting inside the house waiting for us? But, he wasn't. Didn't say anything. Met him, nice enough guy, kind of quiet. Wasn't a big talker, did not try to oversell it. We went inside the house and it's all furnished and everything, but there was no family there, so they must have gotten the family out. And again, I could see from pictures on the wall that there was at least 3 kids, and his wife, and they were all gone. So I was thinking, did they all leave so we can see the house? And if so, where'd they go? This is Purge's in the middle of nowhere. It's not like you can go to the mall, you know? I mean, there's nothing to go, nothing to see, nowhere to go. So I didn't know, but I was thinking all this stuff as I was there. This is all kind of weird. The house itself truly creeped me out. Not so much the main floor. I remember thinking the kitchen was I guess pretty is the right term. It was very Norman Rockwell-ish. And the rest of the main floor was, normal home. Went to the basement. Bottom of the stairs, got a really sick feeling. Just sick to my stomach, like I was going to throw up, just like nauseous. And, I said that to my mom, and she said, "Oh, you're just nervous. You're just nervous because, you're looking at your new home." And again, nobody had officially said we're buying this yet. I think, God, this is weird. So my dad finally came up to me and said, "Well, have you seen the upstairs yet?" And I go, "No." And he's like, "Well, there's 3 bedrooms up there. If we got this place, I would want you to have your first pick." And the reason he said that is because my brother would be going off to, college in a couple of years, and I was going to have the longest time there. So he was going to give me the first pick. So I said, "Okay, well, let's go look at the rooms upstairs." And I got to the stairway going up the stairs. And man, I did not want to go up them. I didn't know what it was. I could not put a finger on it. There was just something that felt like a wall of energy. I mean, it didn't feel good. And I just kind of stared at the stairs for a minute and forced my way up them and got to the top and turned around right away to look back to see if something was behind me, because it felt like something was behind me. And nothing was behind me. So I turned around and looked, and I said, "Well, I guess this one," it was the room at the top of the stairs, it was the first one, the one you could get to the quickest. And my dad said, "What's wrong?" And I turned and I said, "Do you like this place?" And he goes, "I don't know. Do you?" And I told him, "Not really. I like the basketball hoop outside, but I don't really like the house." My brother was there with us. He checked it out. I think he was just kind of going along with things to the best of my memory. But my dad talked to the owner for a while longer. They walked around the property. I assumed they were going back and forth on price. And we got in the car, and we decided to go home. And we weren't, a mile or 2 outside of town when my dad, said, "I think we should keep looking." And this just sparked a terrible argument because my mom wasn't having it. She wanted that house. That was the place they were meant to have. She loved it. It was her, perfect match. It was everything she'd ever dreamt of. And we were getting that fucking house. And my dad did not want it. So that night we're back with my aunt. And the argument continues, and I'm in the bathroom getting ready for bed, and I could hear them arguing in the kitchen. And then the arguing stopped, and it just got dead quiet. And I'm thinking, oh, well, good. The argument's over. I was thirsty. I'm thinking now's a good time to swing out and grab a glass of milk real quick. So I come around the corner, and right as I come around the corner, I catch the end of a swing in which my mother grabbed a 2x4, a wooden 2x4, and hit my father across the back with it as hard as she possibly could. Didn't say a word. The argument stopped for a minute. There was a piece of wood, the 2x4, was sitting right outside the screen door in the garage. Walked out, grabbed it, walked back in without saying a word, and hauled off and cracked my dad as hard as she could across the back with it. My mother was definitely a rule with an iron fist type of person, but this was abnormal. I mean, she could have really, really hurt him. I mean, and she laid that board across the back of his head. She can kill him. you know. I was mortified because I caught the very end of it. I mean, I saw it. And I hear him going, just, Jesus Christ, Deb, what are you doing? And she's telling him, I didn't suffer with you to live in some dump, she kept saying. Like, it was the weirdest thing ever. It was scary. It was very, very scary. And I could not figure out what her connection was to that house. I could not figure it out. And the next day I come home from school, and I hear that in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be moving into our new house in Persia, Iowa. Which I did not know what to think, but I knew what I felt. I was nervous. I was really, really nervous. It didn't make sense to me why we would buy the first place they looked at. Why wouldn't they take time to see other places? What was her natural connection there? Why was she willing to attack my father if she felt as though he wasn't going to go through with the deal? What was going on? But 5 years later, I would learn. I would learn why she felt so connected, why she had to have it. And it was terrifying. It's one of those defining moments where that voice inside of you is screaming, this is wrong, this is wrong. But I had no control over it, But once we moved in, the stage was set. It was as though that house was calling her. And once she got close enough, it locked on. And I'll be honest with you, there's not a day of my life that goes by that I don't wonder how different everything would be today if we did not move into that home. Telling these stories, guys, it's tough for me at times, man. It's crazy how these emotions never really leave you. This was such a profound experience. And there was so much pain that was lived through this story. But it's also why I think it's important to tell it. There's just so much to the story, so many layers. And I hope that all of you get the chance to listen to all 20 hours of it, because a haunting is not some gremlin that you can just kick out of your attic, It affects your pores. It's your relationships, your ability to trust, your ability to love. It just affects everything. And it's important that people know the full scale of what a negative haunting really is. And I think if not for anything else, being able to share the knowledge of this, gives the experience some kind of value. To let somebody know, like me, in that situation, that you're not alone. That these things happen, that you do get gut feelings that you should listen to, that there is the law of attraction. All these things are real. If you guys enjoyed this episode, there is so much more to share. That's just really kind of getting you to Persia. Like I said, on July 4th, the first official 2-hour episode will come out. If you want to purchase this series, click on the link below. Like I said, there's a lot to learn. And it's definitely a story that needs to be told. And thank you guys in advance for your support. Thank you all for listening to the In a Crowded Room podcast. I will be back tomorrow with more. All the best.